Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're starting with what looks like a simple story out of Canada. The national population apparently declined last quarter.
Seems straightforward.
Exactly. But we've got a pile of economic analyses and reports from StatsCan that suggest this one data point is hiding a really deep conflict between, let's say, political goals and what's actually verifiable.
Right.
So on one hand, you've got the current Carney government. They have this huge policy goal, which is to reverse the massive, frankly, unprecedented run-up in the country's temporary resident population, the TRP.
And the latest numbers from Statistics Canada seem to show that, this plan is working. They're even reporting a rare national population decline.
And that reported decline, that's really the pivot point for our whole deep dive today.
It is, because we have to look at a dual challenge here. First, is Ottawa actually achieving its policy goal? And second, how are they handling the quality side of immigration while they do it?
Because the big fear from analysts is that this whole reported drop might be, and this is a great phrase, a statistical mirage.
A statistical mirage? I think that nails it.
It suggests the numbers are telling a story we want to hear about policy success, but maybe it doesn't line up with what's happening on the ground.
So our mission today is to unpack that. We'll focus on the shift in immigrant quality and then the huge question mark hanging over immigrant quantity.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's start with the selection criteria. We need to get a handle on who Canada is choosing to let in and how that's fundamentally changed just in the last couple of years.
Well, for decades, Canada was really held up as the global gold standard for economic immigration.
Right.
Since the 1960s, there was a system for economic immigrants, and there are about 2/3 of all permanent residents that was based almost entirely on objective points.
I saw one of the sources describe it as being like a highly selective university entrance system.
That's a perfect analogy.
You get way more applications than you have spots. So you take the highest performers.
Precisely. It was a rules-based system. Selective, meritocratic. You got points for objective things. Your education level, work experience, how well you spoke English or French. The people with the highest scores got the invitation. Simple as that. It basically removed political influence from the equation.
But the analysis we're looking at, especially the C.D. Howe Institute paper, it argues that in 2023, Canada just pivoted hard away from that model. They say the permanent stream's best and brightest aspirations were also undermined.
They were. The big change was the introduction of something called category-based selection.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means that instead of just, running the numbers and picking the top scores, the government now decides to prioritize certain attributes or jobs before the ranking even happens.
So the highest scoring applicant might just get passed over for someone who fits a specific niche category.
Exactly. Even if that person has a much lower overall score.
Now, I can sort of hear the counter-argument here. I assume the government line is that this is necessary to target, urgent labor shortages that the old point system was maybe too general to fill.
And that is the official justification. But the economists in our source material, they argue that this is a really short-sighted trade-off. They make the point that the objective system delivered top talent for decades, chosen, and I'm quoting here, without political influence.
It might not have filled every single low-skill job opening immediately, but it guaranteed a steady flow of high-caliber people.
That's the argument. So when the government now prioritizes candidates based on categories, which are often described as being low skill, low wage, and low scoring, it becomes much more discretionary.
So is that the central critique, that it's no longer rules-based?
That's it. These analysts say the 2023 change replaced a transparent rules-based system with a discretion-based system. And they warn this creates an opaque system that is exposed to political lobbying, looks like a lottery to prospective migrants, and squeezes out highly skilled candidates.
That lottery comment is powerful. You can imagine being a highly skilled applicant overseas. Before, your path was clear. Get your score as high as possible.
Right.
Now, it must feel like you're just waiting for a government department to suddenly decide they need, a dozen people who specialize in one very specific trade, regardless of your overall economic potential.
And that opacity, that's a real governance problem. If the best and brightest stop applying because the system seems arbitrary, Canada loses its edge in the global talent race.
And this isn't just a federal issue, is it? This trend is also happening with the provincial nominee programs, the PNPs.
The PNPs are a huge part of this. They let provinces nominate immigrants directly to fill their own local labor needs, sort of bypassing some of the federal points criteria.
And the sources say they're making up a bigger and bigger share of total admissions.
Exactly. And the concern is that many provinces are prioritizing groups who were, quote, unable to meet the standard of the point system.
So you have this 1-2 punch. The federal system is shifting to prioritize political categories, and at the same time, the provincial programs are prioritizing their own, often lower-skilled, regional needs.
And that raises really serious long-term questions about the average economic caliber of the people who are becoming permanent residents.
It's a clear paradox, then. The government is trying to lower the total numbers to ease pressure on housing and services.
But at the same time, it's shifting the system away from the very objective, selective criteria that made it so successful economically.
It's like they're trading long-term economic strengths for what looks like short-term labor stability.
Which brings us right to the second, and I would say more explosive problem, the quantity. How do we even know if the plan to lower the numbers is actually working if the data itself might be a mirage?
Let's start with the government's target. What is it they're trying to achieve?
The plan is to get the temporary resident population down to less than 5% of the national population by 2027.
And to do that, you need a pretty major demographic shift.
You do. You need several years of what's called negative net immigration. That doesn't mean no one comes in. It just means more people have to leave Canada than arrive.
So what was the specific StatScan number that made all the headlines recently?
Okay, so the data was for the third quarter of 2025. StatScan calculated that there were 339,505 non-permanent resident outflows.
Outflows, so people leaving.
People presumed to have left or transitioned to permanent status, yes, and that number resulted in a reported national population decline of 76,000 for the quarter. It was huge news.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. To get to that 339,000 outflow number, StatScan had to make a decision. There's a core assumption under all of this, isn't there?
There is a massive one. It's buried in their technical backgrounder, but the agency basically assumes that temporary residents leave the country when their permit expires if no extension has been granted.
Wait, they just assume it. They assume near-perfect compliance.
In short, yes, they assume almost zero visa overstayers.
That sounds less like data collection and more like
Yeah.
statistical wishful thinking.
That's a good way to put it. And this is the engine that drives the whole statistical mirage. They're flying blind on who's actually leaving, so they just assume the rules are being followed.
So what does the outside analysis say? Is there a better estimate for the overstay rate?
There is. You can look at work by former federal economist Henry Lawton and CIBC economist Benjamin Tell. A couple of years back, they estimated maybe 1 million people were in the country without permission.
1 million.
Which suggested that roughly 30% of expired visa holders actually remain in the country. The true number of overstayers is, as the sources say, likely quite a bit higher than zero.
30%. That's not a small number. That's a massive adjustment.
Yeah.
So what happens if we apply that math to the StatScan figure?
Well, this is where the story completely flips. If you take that 30% overstay rate and apply it to those 339,000 outflows that StatScan reported, the national population decline of 76,000, it never happened.
It vanishes. Does it just become zero?
It becomes a population increase. The analysis shows that instead of the population declining by 76,000 people, it actually went up by 26,000 in that same quarter.
That is a swing of over 100,000 people. I mean, that's a huge demographic difference based on a single assumption.
It is the definition of an unstable data point.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the root of the governance problem here. Ottawa has an almost perfect count of who enters Canada.
Right, because you can see them at the border.
But they are, quote, flying blind on who exits because the government doesn't systematically track departures.
Why not? I mean, it seems like such a fundamental piece of data for any country to have.
It's a mix of things: political sensitivity, cost, and just inertia. Setting up a robust exit tracking system is expensive and can bring up civil liberties concerns, even though many other countries do it. So they've chosen convenience over accuracy.
And this isn't the first time StatScan's assumptions about temporary residents have been proven wrong, which really undermines confidence in these new numbers.
You're absolutely right. There's a history here. Back in 2019, StatScan had to conclude that the 2011 census had undercounted the temporary resident population by a staggering 43%.
43%.
And just earlier this year, they had to revise their estimates for previous quarters upward significantly, again.
So, to sum it up, we have a history of major undercounts, and the current calculation that shows a population decline is based on an assumption we have very good reason to believe is wrong.
It means the headline is essentially built on a foundation of sand. If your key metric for success, the exit data, is just an assumption, not a count, then the resulting population figure can't be trusted for any serious planning.
So let's bring the two big themes, quality and quantity, back together for everyone listening. What does this all mean for the big picture?
It means we're seeing this intense structural pressure on the immigration system from two different directions. On one side, the government wants to reduce the total numbers.
But they're doing it while lowering the selectivity standard for permanent residents, which could hurt the economy down the road.
Right. And on the other side, the very success of that reduction plan is fundamentally unmeasurable.
The plan requires negative net immigration to hit that 2027 target, but we literally have no way of knowing if that's happening because the number is just made up. It's an assumption.
Exactly. How can you responsibly manage the system if the difference between a record population decline and a significant population increase is a single, untested assumption? The sources are clear. We won't know if the plan is working until Ottawa starts actually counting who leaves.
And this matters deeply to you, the listener, because good population data is the foundation for everything. I mean, if you don't know your true population size, if you're off by hundreds of thousands of people.
And we're plans for housing demand, for hospital capacity, for new infrastructure projects. They're all built on shaky ground. It's very hard to govern a modern economy if you don't actually know who is in the country.
So the big takeaway is that the system isn't just battling the volume of people. It's battling a fundamental lack of data combined with a policy shift that reduces its most valuable asset, the high caliber of its permanent residents.
It's a perfect storm of policy and data problems.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've really uncovered a serious policy paradox here. This shift away from a selective point system towards political discretion, and I think most shockingly, the statistical power of one single assumption.
That 30% overstayer assumption, it changes everything.
It completely flips a national population decline into a significant increase. It's just stunning.
It is.
Now, here's a final provocative thought for you to consider. If a nation's ability to govern itself, to plan for the future, relies on accurate demographic data, what are the long-term consequences for housing, for healthcare, for all vital services, when the most crucial figure, the one that tells you if you're growing or shrinking, is left entirely to a statistical assumption that history has shown is probably wrong? That's a governance problem worth thinking about.
A big one.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be back.